In today's show, it's all things NBA Draft Lottery. We'll look back at the Trailblazers' history as a lottery team and do a mock draft, a mini one, simulating the lottery picks. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Blazers your first listen every single day. Free on all platforms, 5 days a week, coming at you every single weekday. So make it your part of your daily routine and make it your first listen every single day. Why not make your second listen every single day? Locked On NBA Big Board, because it is draft season, y'all, and that is what today's show is all about. We're talking all things NBA Draft Lottery. This is Monday, May 16th show, and on Monday, May 17th, the NBA will finalize the first 14 picks in the NBA Draft through their televised NBA Draft Lottery. As we stand here today, we don't know where the Blazers will pick, but we do know two things. One, they have the sixth best odds of getting the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. It's about a little over 9% chance of getting the number one overall pick. They have a 37% chance of getting a top 4 pick. Their most likely draft spot is 7. That's what we know. We also know one other thing. Damian Ollie Lillard Sr. is headed to the draft lottery to be the Blazers' representative at the lectern each team in the lottery sends a representative. Damian Lillard is the Blazers representative. I did a joke show about who the Blazers should send, and I came up with bad ideas like free throw guy and Blaze. But really, and I said this on the show, I was like, the best choice is Dame because, one, he's the best player. He's like, at worst, the second best player in franchise history. Him showing up to the lottery where they're going to pick for their future is like sort of a nice nod to like, I'm here for building what's next. It's all of those things. Also, just like good vibes. Sending good players is generally good vibes. When the Blazers last sent like one of their stars to the lottery, recent rookie of the year, reigning rookie of the year, Brandon Roy in 2006, they moved up from the 7th best odds to win the damn thing, to win the lottery and get the number one overall pick. How did that work out? Well, that's what we're going to talk about to begin the show today. I want to do look back at the history of the Blazers in the draft lottery, and then myself and my fellow co-host here at the Locked On Network, Locked On NBA, we simulated the lottery and then did a mock draft of those first 14 picks, and so that's what I want to talk about to close the show as well. But that's what we know right now. Who's going to go? That's Mr. Lillard, Dame Dollar. Sometimes referred to on Basketball Reference as Sub-Zero, despite never being called that. But Dame's going to be there, and the Blazers will have the 6th best odds heading into it on Tuesday night. I've said this a bunch, and I'll say it again here. This show is going to be heavy draft stuff from the moment we find out where the Blazers pick. We will kick off, ramp up, and dive into draft preview stuff. Once we know where the Blazers are going to pick, we'll have a month leading up to the draft to get you everything you possibly need to know. I'll get some draft expert types on here, people who do this professionally for a living, and get them to share their insight on who the Blazers might take, what they're hearing, and all of those things. So if you're just sort of getting into the show and you're excited about draft stuff, it's coming. And this is the week where it's going to come. So let's kick it off with some draft history stuff before we get into the mini mock. The Blazers have been in the lottery 7 times. The draft lottery started in 1985 with your boy Patrick Ewing, and the teams that don't make the playoffs are put, ping pong balls. Their combinations are put into the secret ballot, and whoever's numbers pop up, they pick there. Obviously, they've changed a little bit how it's weighted over the years, a little bit how the odds work over the years, but in general, over the last 37 years, it has been similar. If you do not make the playoffs, there is a chance to get the number one overall pick. The Blazers just have been relatively successful and haven't had a lot of time missing the playoffs and hoping for luck. This year will just be the 8th time in the 38 years of the NBA draft lottery. So 7 and 37 times. They made the playoffs those other 30 years. They've been really good. When they weren't was a stretch in the first decade of the 2000s that you Well, depending on how old you are, you were either born right then because you're like 15, or you remember it well. And it starts with in 2004. That was the first year the Blazers were ever in the draft lottery, some 19 years after it started. Again, the Blazers have been kind of the poison of being pretty successful. And in 2004, they barely missed the playoffs. They finished the 13th best odds, and their pick neither moved up nor down. Started at 13, ended up at 13, and they selected Sebastian Telfair out of Lincoln High School in New York City. Bassie, you might know, didn't end up being a particularly good NBA player, and the Blazers were right back in the lottery in 2005. They had the fourth best overall odds, the fourth best lottery odds heading into the draft lottery, and they moved up to third. But then they traded back to sixth prior to the draft. They made a deal with the Utah Jazz. Utah was sixth. The Blazers were third. They swapped out of third. They didn't take Darren Williams. They didn't take Chris Paul. They took Martell Webster. They already had Bassie. They didn't need a point guard. So the two high-end point guard talents that were going to go in the top five, the Blazers didn't need them, so they traded back to six and took Martell Webster out of Seattle Prep. Back-to-back high schoolers in 04-05. Wah, wah. 06. You can imagine what taking back-to-back high schoolers at the end of, a really successful era leads you. You know what it leads you to? It leads you to being really bad, like the worst record in the NBA, which is what the Blazers had at the end of the 05-06 season. And they fell back. The only time in their lottery history that they have fallen back. They moved from first to fourth, and they ended up forced to fourth, and then they ended up trading that pick, their fourth overall pick, to trade up, swapping with Chicago, who had the second overall pick. The Blazers took Tyrus Thomas at 4, swapped with Chicago, who took LaMarcus Aldridge out of the University of Texas. And guess what? It turned out pretty good. The Blazers turned out pretty good. Also in that draft, but post-lottery, like it's happened on draft night, post-lottery, the Blazers traded Sebastian Telfair, who you may recall from the 2004 draft, just 2 years later, Theo Ratliff to the Boston Celtics in exchange for the rights to the number 7 overall pick. And then they flipped the number 7 overall pick for the number 6 overall pick, who was Brandon Roy. That was post-lottery. Like, it's important because it's top 10 selections and it's moving around in the top 10. And it's kind of maybe not what you hope you do this year, but an evidence that, like, they've in the past, when they've had lottery picks, they've been aggressive to kind of go get the guys they want. We are several regimes removed from Kevin Pritchard in 2006, but this was, that was arguably the most productive draft in the history of the franchise. You could make a case for a couple others, but certainly a very good one when you get LaMarcus and B. Roy in the same draft. But they weren't great again. They were a mediocre team because young players, even with the Rookie of the Year and Brandon Roy and LaMarcus, who really didn't get going until a couple years later when he was like actually very good and then a perennial all-star, the Blazers had the 7th best odds in 2007, as I alluded to before. Sent Brandon Roy to the lottery, and they hopped up to number 1 overall. And who did they get for their troubles? Greg Oden. Could have had this other guy, skinny kid from Texas, who ended up going to the Seattle Supersonics. Forget his name. I think he ended up being pretty good. I'll have to look it up, but I think the other guy they didn't pick, other than Greg Oden, ended up being pretty good. Bummer. In 2008, they were back, barely missed the playoffs, but they were back in 2008. They finished 13th and did not move, and they drafted Brandon Rush, but swapped him for the 11th overall pick in Jared Bayless. So then the Blazers had this core of LaMarcus, Brandon Roy, JB, Jared Bayless, eventually known as Jayless in these parts, and Greg Oden. They made the playoffs a handful of years in a row, and they didn't get back into the lottery until Brandon Roy's knees broke down. The team mutinied and quit on Nate McMillan. They fired Nate McMillan. They tore this thing down and truly tanked in 2012. 2012 set them on this era of basketball, the next decade of basketball. Let's talk about what that next decade of basketball looks like. But first, I want to tell you about Sakara, a new sponsor to this podcast, and a company that is dedicated to anchoring food as medicine and on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with their organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfasts, lunches, and dinners are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients, helping boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, get your skin glowing, and plus it's all delivered right to your door and ready to eat. Sakara's functional, plant-rich wellness essentials help you create a body you love living in. From their best-selling Metabolism Super Powder to the Foundation, their daily supplement packs, Sakara's products are designed to support your wellness goals anytime, anywhere. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter the code lockedon20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. All right, let's keep it rolling through Blazers history. They get the core going. The core mutinies. They fire the coach that doesn't. They tear it down. They trade Marcus Camby. They trade Gerald Wallace to the Nets. What do they get for trading Gerald Wallace to the Nets? They get the number 6 pick in the NBA draft. They miss the playoffs as well, and they get their own number 11 pick in the NBA draft. This is the 2012 draft lottery. The envelopes come out. The Blazers don't move. Number 6 doesn't move. The pick they acquired from the Nets at the trade deadline. Number 11 doesn't move. The Nets pick, importantly, was top 3 protected. So the Blazers didn't want it to move, right? They wanted it to kind of stay where it was. It doesn't move. The 11th pick doesn't move. With number 6 overall pick, they take a point guard out of Weber State. This was the perfect selection for the Blazers because they had they were pretty good, but they just did not they were like a decent, pretty good is kind of a stretch. They had a core of players that they could build with and forward, but they did not have. They had been searching for a point guard of the future for closing in on a decade. Since they drafted Sebastian Telfair, who was supposed to be the point guard of the future, post Damon Stoudemire, he didn't work out. He got traded a little bit after that. Jared Bayless, he wasn't the guy. They've been still searching for the point guard of the future. They get it with the 6th pick, a point guard out of Weber State, one of the best players in the history of the Big Sky, but someone who hadn't played in the NCAA tournament and maybe didn't have as big of a profile, but had shot up the draft boards during the workout season, during the lead up to the draft, because the dude was a baller. And the Kings at 5 took Thomas Robinson, so the Blazers at 6 could take Damian Ollie Lillard. It's a pretty good pick at 12. At 11, they took Myers Leonard. He turned out fine. He played a bunch of years here. I don't know if fine is even the word. He wasn't very good. He did play a bunch of years here. In 2013, the Blazers missed the playoffs. In fact, they were pretty competitive that year, but they lost the final 13 games of the regular season. The wheels fell off at the end. They were competitive until they weren't, and then they were bad again under new coach Terry Stotts. In 2013, they get back in the draft lottery. They don't go anywhere. They have the 10th pick, and it didn't move, and they select a guard out of Lehigh who had just, gone back to school and hurt his foot after this breakout NCAA tournament appearance the prior spring, but he got hurt even though he was leading the NCAA in scoring at the time, but was still like a pretty clear lottery pick. He was pegged to go right where he went, and the Blazers drafted a 6'2 guard out of Lehigh named Christian James McCollum. Again, go look at the 2013 draft. Pretty darn good pick. Yes, it wasn't Giannis Antetokounmpo in 2013, but 14 other teams passed on Giannis Antetokounmpo, and listen, Cody Zeller and Ben McLemore and a whole bunch of dudes who went ahead of CJ in that 2013 top 10 did not have the career, or have not had the career that CJ has had. Anthony Bennett, shout out to your boy. Didn't exactly put together the same career that CJ McCollum had. A really good pick at 10, and if you pick Dame at 12, you pick CJ at 10. Even when the wheels fall off in 2015, LaMarcus Aldridge leaves after a decade or 9 years with the Blazers, you're still a team that makes the playoffs every year until now, and that is your history of the Blazers draft lottery. Is that I'll just read them back to you. Sebastian Telfair, Martell Webster, LaMarcus Aldridge, Greg Oden, Jared Bayless, Myers Leonard, Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum. Those are the guys that the Blazers have made other trades, but those are like lottery picks that they owned heading into the lottery that they ended up with. Brandon Roy is not included because he's a draft day trade and a trade they acquired after the lottery. Again, you can move up and make moves, but the Blazers, I would say, for the most part, their draft history in the lottery has been good. Unless it's been really bad, like Sebastian Telfair, Martell Webster, and Greg Oden. You want to put if you're in these positions, if the Blazers don't get here much, this will be the 8th time that they're here since 1985. They don't get here much. You got to make the most of it. You really do. You have to hit these picks to have a chance, right? Like if you draft Bassie and Martell in back-to-back seasons in 2006, the following year, you're going to have the worst record in the league. Like if you, obviously taking high schoolers is different, like it's different, but you got to hit these picks. And so that's why when the good old folks at the Locked On Network said, hey, we're going to do a mock lottery, I wanted to make sure I hit this pick. And here's how it worked. The good folks who run the network, they simulated the order for us and then they sent it out. And the Blazers, after that simulated order, drum roll please, bang, didn't move anywhere. They had the 6th best odds going in. They finished with the 6th best odds. The Orlando Magic jumped up to 1. So what did I do when I was given the 6th pick with 5 teams ahead of me? Well, you're going to have to come back in the 3rd segment to find out. Let's talk about it to close the show. What I did, why I did it, and kind of a look ahead of the sort of logic that the draft lottery, when it comes up in a month, or where the Blazers end up in the draft lottery on Tuesday night, kind of will, in some ways, determine what their future will be. But before we get there, and I tell you what I did in that mock draft lottery, let me tell you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar that there is. Period, bar none, or bar number one. Maybe that's a better pun for you. My personal favorite's peanut butter brownie. Shout out to the man, Cody Workala, who I know is out there crushing a peanut butter brownie bar as he listens or right before he listens to Fuel Up. And you can really fuel up because you're rocking with, on average, every Built Bar, 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, and 4 net carbs. All tasty, all healthy. There's a million other flavors, so go to Built.com right now and see what they're working with. Find what you like, and then order it. Test them out. And to test them out, use the promo code LOCKED15. Save yourself 15% when you go to Built.com. And then once you find what you like, use the promo code again because you'll get it off your next order as well. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk mock draft stuff. I was given the 6th pick in the Locked On NBA mock draft, and what did I do with it? Well, what did I do with it was determined in large part by what my colleagues did with their picks before me. The Orlando Magic had the top pick, then OKC, then Houston, then Detroit, then Indiana, then Portland, right there at 6th. With the first pick, the Orlando Magic made kind of a surprising choice. Representing Locked On Magic, they went with Paolo Banchero out of Duke and went number 1 overall. The Oklahoma City Thunder were next. They took Jabari Smith Jr. That's a nice little pick for them and someone that could be a big part of their future, just kind of by default. If you're in the 3rd spot and Banchero and Jabari Smith go 1, 2, almost certainly the top 3 picks will go in some order: Banchero, Jabari Smith Jr., and Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga, and that's what Houston did. They took Chet Holmgren with the 3rd overall pick. And then we got to our first surprise of the draft. The Detroit Pistons are in 4th. The Pistons have, some good young parts. Sadiq Bey looks like a good young player. Cade Cunningham looks like he might be a future star. Isaiah Stewart is like an NBA player at his position, right? Like, I don't know if he's like a high-level starter in the future, but I think Isaiah Stewart's going to play a long time as an NBA player at big man, at center, right? They need some other parts, but they've got a long tail rebuild coming. And because of that, my man, Ku Khahil, what's the deal? Picking on behalf of the Pistons, went with Shaedon Sharpe out of Kentucky, the 5-star recruit who did not play college basketball, to preserve exactly this, his opportunity to go with the number 4 overall pick. And that's what he did. When he went 4th, I knew the Blazers were going to be in a good spot. I said, oh, okay, that kind of rules out, for me, picking in the 6th position, I don't have to worry about Sharpe. Sharpe for me is this guy who's got crazy upside, right? But the Blazers don't really need a guard. Like, he's 6'6" and big, and maybe he can play some wing in the NBA and like with the athleticism, maybe that does check a box where he can play a lot of minutes at the 3 and he'll get there and the Pistons will be really happy if that's how it shakes out, because they'll get, this dynamic super athlete at 6'6". It's like kind of what every team wants, like a guy who can shoot pull-up threes and is like a really good athlete with length. there's some real appeal with Sharp. But when I knew when he was off the board at 4, it gave me a chance to kind of, I was going to be picking between two very good players at 5, or two players that are certainly piqued my interest. I still haven't finalized who my number one choice would be for the Blazers, and I won't finalize that until I see where they pick on Tuesday night. But as we head into that, as we're sort of still in simulation mode, or speculation mode rather, I knew that was going to have some really nice choices. And when the Indiana Pacers expectedly took Jaden Ivey at 5, they went with the Purdue guard who's projected almost everywhere to go 4. The surprise was Shaedon Sharpe at 5 and not Ivy, and the Pacers went with Ivy at 5. That left an easy choice for me. I had the 6th pick. I was on the clock. I sent my email in real fast, and I said, with the 6th pick in the draft, the Portland Trail Blazers select Keegan Murray from Iowa. A name that a lot of Blazers fans have sent to me, a name that I've seen a bunch on Reddit, a name that I've seen a bunch when I've ever done these in the YouTube comments. The name that a lot of people want. To finish out the lottery, AJ Griffin of Duke went 7th to the Kings. Ben Mathurin of Arizona went 8th to the Pelicans. Jalen Duren went 9th to the Spurs. Malachi Branham went 10th to the Wizards. Dyson Daniels went 11th to the Knicks. Jeremy Sohan of Baylor went to the OKC Thunder at 12. At 13, the Charlotte Hornets took Johnny Davis of Wisconsin. And at 14, the Cleveland Cavaliers closed out the lottery with Ochai Agbaji out of Kansas. So, why did I go Keegan Murray? Well, I went Keegan Murray for a variety of reasons. One, according to sort of my amateur way of doing this, he was the best player available. I think he's going to be the best player available. He fits the description of the way I described Damian Lillard. Not that I think he is going to be Damian Lillard, let me be clear. But in terms of he hits the sort of dual towers of a position of need and a good player. You want the player that you think this might be the best player available. I believe he was at the time, is why I took him. But he also fills a position of need. If Shaedon Sharpe had been there, I would have had maybe more to debate. I probably still personally would have gone with Murray because I think he's a earlier contributor than Sharpe. Although I think I'm saying that because I haven't seen Shaedon Sharpe play except for some videos that are available on YouTube. I saw him wear the Kentucky warm-ups. That's about as much basketball as I've truly seen him play live. A couple games against LSU when he had warm-ups on, and I was like, oh, let me familiarize myself with this gentleman because the Blazers season is heading south. So Murray is I think the case for Murray is pretty simple. He's one of the most productive players, if not the most productive player in college basketball last season. He's, 6'8", 220, 6'11" wingspan. I think he has maybe not no problem, but I think he grades out as a pretty normal size for a power forward in the NBA, a position of desperate need for the Blazers. Last season, like I said, one of the most productive players in college basketball. 23.5 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.9 blocks. Dude shot 39% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game and 62% from 2. He was just super duper efficient. A career 60% effective field goal percentage in 2 seasons at Iowa. And a consensus All-American. You can make an argument that Keegan Murray has a little bit less upside than other guys in the draft. Dyson Daniels might have more upside. Jalen Duren, because of his relatively raw, might have more upside. Certainly Shaedon Sharpe might have more of that. You're reaching for something that could be more of that. I think you could even make a case that some guys deeper down in the top 10 picks have more upside. But in terms of just overall production and the shooting ability and the size, the types of things that the Blazers need, Keegan Murray is basically a no-brainer for me. I watched him play 2 games, to be clear. I've said this a bunch, and I'll continue to say it throughout draft season. I rely on experts during draft season. I don't want to fake the funk. I'm not a big college basketball guy. I watch more college basketball, or more sort of random college basketball, than I ever have, or that I have in a long, long time this year, trying to get prepared for the podcast. But I haven't poured over Keegan Murray tape. I watched him play in the Big Ten tournament against Northwestern, and he was outrageous, outrageous. They had no answer for him. And then I watched him play in the NCAA tournament, and against a little bit better competition in the NCAA tournament, he wasn't as good. Against lesser competition in the Big Ten tournament, he was ridiculous. Just scoring from every level. Pick and pop, post-up moves, pull-up jumpers, in transition, insane in the half-court off handoffs, just everything you want. He was just amazing at that level. I think in general, one thing I've learned from just like reading a bunch about the draft is high usage guys in college are maybe a little harder to scout because there's just going to be lower usage in the NBA. Keegan Murray had the ball a ton and got a ton of offense run through him at Iowa. He is going to be in a complementary role at best in the NBA, right? If not like an ancillary role. So he's going to be even if his skill set eventually develops to something similar to it was his sophomore year at Iowa, early on, he's going to be a spacer and a shooter. And then you hope the other stuff, you hope his rebounding, you hope his sort of the variety of offense can kind of come into play. But early on, he is going to be, if say he were to start day one for the Blazers, which I don't think is great. I don't think they want to, if they're going to be like a really good team, I don't think starting a rookie on day one is great. But say he does, like, he's going to be the fifth option on offense as a rookie. So it's like he's not going to be in the same role that he was. So kind of scouting for what role player Keegan Murray looks like, I think is I think is a little more challenging than other guys who didn't have such a massive usage rate in college. But the shooting, he's been an efficient scorer both years in college, even in minor roles a freshman year, stepped into a massive 35 a minute a night role as a sophomore, and his efficiency barely dropped off if it didn't get a little bit better. Like he's just a dude who can really score and has the size to maybe turn into an effective player on both ends of the floor if you believe it. Keegan Murray was an easy one for me. If you are watching the show, if you're this deep in the show and you're watching on YouTube and if you were the sixth pick in the draft when it was Banchero, Smith Jr., Holmgren, Sharp, and Ivy off the board at sixth, if you have someone else who you take at sixth, comment in the YouTube channel below and let me know. In general, the best way to support the show if you're watching on YouTube is to leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know your thoughts on Keegan Murray. If you're excited about Keegan Murray, leave a comment in the YouTube channel and let me know. The other way to support the show is just to tell your friends. Available, like I said, 5 days a week. You can make it your first listen every day. Start every single day. Listen to Locked On Blazers because it's available and free. Always, always free on all the platforms. Wherever you're looking for us, just search Locked On Blazers and you'll find us. More draft stuff this week is coming at you. We'll have an interview with a draft expert that's going to be on the show later this week, so make sure you come back for that one. We'll know where the Blazers pick. Wednesday show, we'll be celebrating where the Blazers pick when they get that number one overall pick. And we can all dream of debating Chet versus Jabari versus Paolo Banchero. I think it's really Chet versus Jabari, but we can all dream of the big debates leading up to it. Honk twice for Durant, if you will. It's draft season. We're here. I appreciate you listening, and I'll talk to you soon.